Beautiful. I'll just say this right now. You're welcome to ask me any questions at any time. Just turn your mic off and ask me a question. If you don't want to ask a question with your voice, just chuck it in the chat and I'll address it, okay? Cool. I'll share my screen and let's get started, shall we? Cool. A couple of seconds to get this sorted. Nice. So this evening, we'll be talking about food tracking, a little bit about meal timing and portion control as well, okay? So we're going to talk about what food tracking actually is, tracking briefly, and why we want to do it and keep record of our food. Advice on how to actually go about tracking your food, keeping record of your food, depending how you're doing it. Some general guidelines in regards to portion control with food, but I will also address that everybody's different and that everybody will need different amounts of different foods depending on their current situation. And then based on some feedback from others who have been in previous nutrition webinars, I'm going to talk a little bit about meal timing as well towards the end, okay? I will remind you, I'm just going to stop the share there. I'll remind you that you're welcome at any time to ask me questions. But if you're not quite confident in asking questions, just chuck it in the chat, okay? And I'll address it, okay? Cool, let's get started. So do any of you here this evening track your foods? Whether that be MyFitnessPal, whether that be on your food diaries. Do any of you do it?
No.
No? No, that's okay.
I started with MyFitnessPal, but I've dropped off.
Dropped off? Why have you dropped off?
Sometimes forgetting to do it, and sometimes just not finding products not coming up, and also building my own recipes in there. So do my own a lot of
Okay, yep, cool. There's a few common challenges there. Yes, definitely.
time consuming.
Sorry, what was that last one?
But sometimes it's a bit time consuming building the recipes in there.
Yeah, it is. It can be time consuming. Depending on your goals, it's up to you to evaluate when it's worth it and when maybe you can do things a bit quicker. But we'll get into that a little bit further along, okay? But it definitely is a challenge to track your food, okay? So tracking essentially is keeping record of what you're eating. And there's several ways of doing that. There's objective methods, which is when you are on MyFitnessPal and you're weighing foods, you're scanning certain foods, tracking certain quantities of the actual food you're eating, as well as the nutrients in those foods and paying attention to what contains what nutrients, how much of the food contains those things, okay? There's also subjective methods, which is essentially, let's use an example of food diary, where we're just writing down, I had, let's say, a piece of toast, a couple of eggs, and salmon for breakfast, without paying too much attention to quantities or precise attention to quantities. Right? Now, there's various reasons why we want to track our food, especially in initial phases anyway, whatever your goals may be, health and fitness wise. The first one is to educate ourselves. And depending on how much background you have in food and nutrition, we want to educate ourselves, and us as trainers want to educate our clients regarding which foods contain which nutrients and, let's say, use the word loosely, appropriate quantities and frequencies of certain foods that we want to be consuming based on our goals. Okay. The long story short, it helps us to learn more about the food that we're eating. Okay. The second one helps us to build awareness around what we're actually eating on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. It's very easy and also normal to just eat food, right? We've been growing up eating food ever since we can remember. So it's common for people not to pay too much attention to what's going into their mouths. So by tracking, whether that be in MyFitnessPal, whether it be in a food diary, it's beneficial to build more awareness around what we're actually eating. So we can pat ourselves on the back for things we're doing well, but then also we can pull ourselves into line regarding things we need to improve to actually get on track and start working towards our goals. Okay, cool. So I rambled a lot there. In summary, there's different ways you can track. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's up to you and your trainer to decide which way is best for you, depending on your goals and your situation, your background. And we mainly want to track or keep record of our food to educate ourselves, also to build more awareness around what we're eating on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Okay. So that's the end of the first section. Does anybody have any questions? You're welcome to ask me here. You're welcome to type it in the chat.
Sorry, do you use MyFitnessPal?
Myself?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I do for my own training and with my own coach. I do, and I also use it with a few of my clients, but not all of them.
Cool. Thank you.
That's right. Could you have any questions off the bat about MyFitnessPal?
No, I haven't. I'm just downloading it now, so I'm having a little sus.
Sure, of course. No stress. Beautiful. We'll move on to the next part. So I've got my checklist here. We're talking about some pointers and some advice for tracking your food, because it can be pretty daunting at the start if we haven't done much tracking of our food before. It can seem like a big daunting task, but it doesn't have to be. It'll be difficult at first, but it doesn't have to be a big daunting task, okay? The first thing I'll say, I've already touched on it a little bit, is the level of detail that you put into your tracking will depend purely on your goals and your situation right now. So I'll use the example, somebody who generally wants to build better eating habits and lose a few kilos and improve their fitness. This is a very general example. Probably doesn't need to pay attention to precise macro and micronutrients in their food and be weighing every single meal and snack. So that's this end of the spectrum. You generally keeping a record, a diary of what you're having can be very useful, but we probably don't need to be paying precise attention to specific quantities. The other end of the spectrum, I'll use as an example, a bodybuilder or a physique competitor who needs to pay attention to precise quantities of their food and precise numbers to be able to perform or to compete in their competition. All right. So there's two ends of the spectrum here. Depending on what your goal is, depending on your current situation, you'll fall somewhere in the middle, hopefully somewhere right in the middle. Okay. Good evening, Anthony. How are you, mates? Cool. So that's the first thing I'll say. There's no right or wrong way of going about tracking. It will depend purely on yourself, okay? The second thing I'll say is we don't need to track forever, okay? There's going to be periods where tracking will be more beneficial, especially in early stages. Like we were saying, let's go back to the early thing I said, to educate you on foods and to also help build awareness around your eating patterns. But down the track, if you want to keep on tracking, great. If you don't want to track anymore down the track, once you and your trainer have established that you're a little more confident with your eating and controlling your eating, then it's probably, you don't need to track forever. So let that be reassurance to those of you in the early stages who are finding it hard to be motivated and finding it daunting. Just remind yourself, it's not forever you'll be tracking your food. It's just for now to benefit you and to help you learn more about your eating. Okay. And it's also to help you train and help you as well. Okay. I mentioned that it's an educational tool, but another way for you to think about tracking in the short term anyway, is that when you're going to track your breakfast or your lunch and it's starting to become more of a task and you're getting frustrated with the difficulties of it, remind yourself that it's to benefit you. And just like exercise, just like your trainer's advice, tracking is a tool that you're using to help you reach your goals. It's rather than thinking of it as a chore. Okay. So I'll repeat that. Try and think of tracking as an educational tool rather than a chore that you have to do and then something that's taking time out of your life. Okay. So it's there to help you and to benefit you, to help your trainer help you as well. Okay. Now, let's move on to some tips and some tricks. Okay. Now there's plenty that goes into MyFitnessPal and other methods of tracking, but I'm going to touch on a few key things that we should have down pat especially if we're using MyFitnessPal. The first one I'll mention is weighing things like meat and fish and chicken, other poultry, as well as things like grains, for example, rice, and root vegetables like, let's say, potatoes. We want to weigh these things raw. Why do we want to weigh these things raw? When we cook our food, let's use a steak as an example. Let's say a 150-gram steak that you whack onto the fry pan. Depending on how long you cook that for and at what temperature it's at, different amounts of water can be lost from that steak. All right, a steak cooked for 10 minutes will lose more water than a steak cooked for 5 minutes. A steak cooked at a higher temperature for longer will lose more water than a steak cooked at a lower temperature for a shorter amount of time. Okay, so if we weigh a steak cooked and we go into MyFitnessPal and say porterhouse steak, blah blah blah, cooked, it may over or underestimate how much you're actually having. Okay, so same with rice, except in the opposite direction. Things like rice and pasta absorb water when they're being cooked. So we want to still weigh them raw, okay? Just so water content isn't leading us to track inaccurately, okay? Long story short there, track as much as you can. It's not the end of the world if you don't. Track as much of your meat, fish, poultry, as well as grains, potatoes, and root vegetables as raw, okay, before you cook them, okay? Another similar tip in line with that is try and be as specific as possible. Whether you're writing a food diary, whether you're in MyFitnessPal, try and be specific. So instead of saying I had 2 slices of bread, say I had 2 slices of Tip Top or Baker's Delight multigrain bread, okay? Just because nutrient values can differ greatly, even quantities can differ greatly between products and brands, okay? So when you're using MyFitnessPal, when you're entering a food diary, try and be specific with the type of food as well as the brand in itself, okay? And finally, another example, which is again similar, try to break down your meals as much as possible, okay? Now, this is challenging by all means, especially in early stages, but I'll use another example. Let's say a pad thai. A pad thai that you get from your local Thai restaurant will likely be very different ingredients and quantities to a frozen meal pad thai from the freezer at Coles to a homemade pad thai that you make from a recipe book, okay? There's going to be different ingredients going in. There's going to be different cooking times, okay? There's going to be lots of differences between those. So we want to be as specific as possible, okay? In MyFitnessPal, you estimate as much as possible the different ingredients that went in. At home, you enter the ingredients individually that you used. The noodles, the oil, the chicken, okay? Yes, that seems tedious. Yes, that seems annoying. You don't have to do that. But if you want to be accurate and be on track a little bit more, then it's worth it. And let's go back to what I said at the start. Tracking, no matter which method you're using, is an educational tool to help you learn about your food and stay on track rather than a chore that you have to do forever, which it's not, okay? I've said a lot there, okay? I'll stop talking for the time being. Are there any questions anybody has? Remember, you can say them out loud, put them in the chat, and I'll address them. Go for it.
How long have you been using MyFitnessPal for? Like, do you do it consistently, or do you find it difficult to like kind of stay on board with it?
So myself, I've been using MyFitnessPal for, I'm going to say, 1.5 to 2 years with my coach, and then also previously just myself. The way I like to go about it is whenever I am cooking food for myself, whenever I am in, say, direct control of my food, I'll track. Okay. Because I'll track. However, in saying that, and I enjoy tracking it. In saying that, if there's ever a time where I'm going to a party, if there's ever a time where I've been on holiday earlier this year, I make an effort to track less, if at all, simply because we don't want it to be something that takes over our lives. However, it is something we want to be doing consistently as possible. Okay?
Cool, thank you.
No stress. We'll move on now to some general portion control guidelines, okay? And I will, again, start this off by saying the portions we have are completely dependent on your goals and your current situation yourself, your body, your goals, and your current health status, okay? Completely dependent on that. As an extreme example, a marathon runner will need very different amounts of nutrition than a bodybuilder will need very different amounts of nutrition than an average Joe on the street wanting to improve their fitness a bit. Okay, there's very different situations. So there's no right or wrong or one size fits all for portions. Okay, so I'm not going to be talking about specific quantities here, but I will be speaking about general guidelines that the Australian Dietary Guidelines recommend and what we recommend to get going, which are very similar. Okay, let's start off with protein. And we spoke about protein last week: meat, fish, poultry, eggs, Greek yogurt, tofu, beans. Okay, these sorts of things, we want to be aiming for roughly a palm's worth, okay, on our plate. So let's use a steak as an example. Should be about the size of your palm, very roughly speaking, okay? Let's move on to a carbohydrate source. For example, pasta, rice, potato. It should be similar size, if not slightly bigger, about the size of your fist, okay? Moving on, a fat source, such as nuts, oils, nut butters, avocado, things like that. We usually say about a thumb. Sometimes leaning towards 2 thumbs, again, depending on your situation in itself, okay? And finally, non-starchy vegetables, think things like most greens, capsicum, carrots, mushrooms, things like that, about 2 palms worth, okay? There's not really any limits on these, but we should be aiming for about 2 palms worth to get the benefits from vegetables, okay? Again, those are very rough guidelines. What matters most is the total context of your entire diet and you as a person and your specific goals in itself, okay? Rather than specific cookie cutter, one size fits all advice, okay?
If we're eating like green veggies like spinach or anything, so we will be like 2 palm size will be raw or cooked?
Generally, it depends on whether you're having a raw salad veg or cooked meals. Spinach wilts down a lot. It's hard to have 2 palms worth of that, but I would say cooked. In this scenario, I would say a cooked meal is, and I know it's a bit confusing as I was speaking about raw before. In terms of a cooked meal, aim for about 2 palms worth. Okay.
Thank you.
If you're tracking in itself on MyFitnessPal, I'd recommend using raw values. Okay.
Okay.
If you're using MyFitnessPal, but if you're just generally speaking in terms of palms and thumbs worth, then I'd say think about cooked.
How about breads and flours and things like that?
In terms of portion sizes?
Yep.
Again, the general guidelines from the Australian Dietary Guidelines, 1 serve of bread is 1 slice or half a roll, half a common bread roll that you get, yeah? However, in saying that, 2 more things in regards to that. Depending on your age and your health status, you may be recommended to consume up to 5 to 6 servings of grains and cereals a day, okay? So that's taken into consideration, all right? So you don't have to have 1 slice of bread at a time. You don't have to have half a roll. Again, what matters most is your entire diet, the big picture, remember, okay? But if you want to know specific serve sizes in regards to what the government recommendations say, 1 slice of bread is a serve size. Okay, cool. Any questions there on general portion sizes? Again, you're welcome to type it in the chat if you don't want to speak out loud.
If you usually have like large portions, can you like kind of train your body to have smaller portions? like, let's say you eat bigger portions, but you don't really need the bigger portions. That can your body kind of get used to having smaller portions, or like, do you kind of get what I mean, ish?
Yes, I do know what you're saying.
Mhm.
Again, the first point of call would be, what is the person's goal? Let's use a general example here. Let's say Sam wants to slowly lose weight, and they're having slightly too much food for their goals. So they're not eating the quantity of food they need to be slowly losing weight.
Yeah.
In terms of reducing certain foods on a plate, we would reduce the portion sizes. So for example, if they're having 2 fists worth of pasta, we probably start off about half a fist off and then gradually work down to 1 fist.
Cool.
But then we bulk the rest of the meal up with lower energy things like non-starchy vegetables. Let's say broccoli as an example, but broccoli is not the only one, okay? Because different foods contain different amounts of energy, kilojoules or calories, depending on the metric you use, okay? So a fist's worth of pasta or potatoes, as an example, will have a lot more energy, mainly from carbohydrates, than a fistful of spinach, mushrooms, and capsicum, let's say. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're having slightly too much of energy dense foods, then we reduce the quantities of those. But then if the person still wants bulky meals, we put more energy, lower energy foods in.
Okay.
So they're still getting full. They're still getting as full as they're used to getting, but they're not consuming as much total energy for that quantity of that mass of food. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. And the easiest way of doing that is by following the palm, fist, and double palm serve sizes, because that should help you feel satiated without consuming too much energy. Okay.
Like we need thumb size of fat in every meal. And I like, for example, if I already cook my food in like 1 spoon of oil, so we don't need extra avocado or nuts. Right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you don't have to have a thumb's worth of fat in the meal. You don't have to have that. That's just a general guideline to make sure we're not consuming too much for our goals. Does that make sense?
So the fat should be on fat should be on the all 3 meals, or just like once in a 1 meal?
In regards to the fats, or in regards to the whole meal?
The whole 3 times we can have like little fat.
Yes. Yeah. As long as we're sticking to the approximate thumb serve size.
Okay.
So, for example, in breakfast, you might have a thumb's worth of almonds. In lunch, you might have a quarter avocado on your salad. You might have a tablespoon of olive oil on your salad.
Yeah.
That's an approximate guide, yes.
Thank you.
But then again, you don't have to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. The final one I'm going to speak about, because a few people were interested in it last time I asked, was meal timing. Okay. I'll preface this by saying that what matters the most in regards to your body weights, I'll just use body weight as an example, is your total energy intake across the whole day. Okay. So in regards to your body weight, generally speaking, whether you have, let's say, your total energy intake in 3 meals won't differ that much on your body weight if you have it across 5 meals or if you have it in 2 meals. Okay. Your total energy intake across the day will be the primary, in regards to your energy expenditure, will be the primary determinant of your body weight. Okay. I'm going to use intermittent fasting as an example. Some of you may be familiar with what that is. Other people with you may not. Intermittent fasting is when you specify certain windows where you deliberately don't eat, and then specify certain windows where you fit all of your intake in. Okay. For example, you don't start eating until 12 p.m. and you eat all the way through until 6 p.m. Let's just use that as an example. Okay. So all of your energy intake is restricted to those 6 hours. The rest of the time, including when you're sleeping, you're not eating. Okay. Some people like to claim that to be superior and help and say that has some magic effects on weight loss. It does not have any magic on weight loss. In some people, it's effective at controlling that total calorie intake that we spoke about, because it's harder to fit a large amount of food in that restricted time window compared to from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed. Okay. A positive of something like that, intermittent fasting, would be that it doesn't exclude any certain food groups. It doesn't say you can't have carbohydrates, you can't have fats. There's no restriction on food groups. However, in saying that, restricting your time windows of eating can impact things like social gatherings. I know it's not very applicable right now in the pandemic situation, but think about before we were in isolation. If you were restricting your time window of eating, you can't eat after 6 p.m. Think about if you're going out for dinner with your family. Think if you're going to a birthday party where they're going to have food available. There's a little bit of social friction there, okay? That's one reason why we don't like to promote extreme diets like that, restricting when you can and can't eat, simply because it's less likely to be sustained forever if there's social friction happening, okay? Another example is breakfast. It used to be thought of as the most important meal of the day. It could be in some people, for athletes that wake up and are going to be training in a couple of hours, or if yourself, you're waking up and you're going to be doing an intense training session at a couple of hours after you wake up, eating breakfast is likely fairly important for that exercise session. Or if you don't get an opportunity to eat for a few hours at work and you want to go to work on a full stomach, it's probably beneficial to eat breakfast. But not eating breakfast will not necessarily offer you any large benefits. Some people like to claim that it will offer superior fat loss or weight loss benefits, but it won't, okay? Eating breakfast or eating first thing in the morning will suit some people and their specific lifestyle situations. It won't suit others. They may not be hungry first thing in the morning. They may be very rushed in the morning and they may want to wait a few hours. Again, coming back to what I said at the start, your total intake across the day is what matters the most. How you go about doing that, what's most important is what suits your specific lifestyle situation. Okay? What you can do to meet your goals, to make sure you're keeping your health in check, whilst also, sorry, I'm getting a message down the bottom in the chat. Not sure what that is. I have Spanish now. What's that? Sorry, Ruby? Are you there, Ruby? No, we seem to have lost her. Sorry. What matters the most is your total energy intake across the day. How you do that is specific to you. So all I'm trying to say here, try not to get latched onto any fads out there telling you have to restrict your eating to certain time periods. Okay? The final thing I'll say before we wrap it up with some questions is why it's likely beneficial for you to have 3 to 6 regular meals throughout the day. I'll touch on a couple of points, okay? The first one is if we're regularly eating throughout the day, whether that be 3 larger meals, whether that be 3 meals and a couple of snacks, that's completely up to you. But if we're eating regularly and consistently, it'll help to keep our hunger at bay and our energy levels up sustainably throughout the day. Compared to if we're hungry in the morning and we're deliberately starving ourselves till, let's say, 12 o'clock, you may, not necessarily, you may overeat later on in the day. At lunchtime, you may graze on snacks. In the afternoon, you may have a larger dinner. Okay? May, I'm not saying necessarily. Another benefit, especially those doing consistent high intensity exercise, well, especially those trying to build muscle, is regularly eating, let's say 3 to 6 times a day, will supply a constant supply of protein as well as total energy to allow your muscles to build and repair themselves, as well as to allow you to recover for following exercise sessions. Okay, so I'll sum that up quickly. There's no set cookie cutter way that we have to space out our meals. Do so, which allows you to keep your goals in mind and allow you to meet all of your health needs, which also fits into your specific lifestyle situation. Why am I saying that? Because that's what you're most likely going to sustain down the track into the future, okay? Which is what we want to be promoting. However, eating 3 to 6 times a day, keeping our total energy intake in mind, is likely going to be beneficial for a lot of people. Simply just keep your hunger levels at bay, satiated, as well as give you a constant energy and nutrient supply. Okay? I've rambled a lot there. I'm going to stop talking, and for another few minutes, if you want to type any questions, if you want to yell out any questions, please be my guest. More than happy to answer them.
Sorry, man, I missed the first few minutes. What's this MyFitnessPal thing?
MyFitnessPal? No worries, Anthony. That's all right. MyFitnessPal is an app that you can download onto your phones, either Samsung or Apple, and it allows you to keep track of the foods that you're eating. Okay, you pay attention to specific quantities. So you're going to be entering specific measures, let's say household measures like cups, or actual weights, which is preferable, like grams and mils. And it also has a feature on there where you can scan certain foods in with barcodes. So you get as specific products as possible. And it helps you keep track of your nutrient intake from day to day.
And does it take into consideration your actual current conditions, like your body weight, your BMI, all that sort of information? Does it ask you for that at the start so that it has a guide as to advise you maybe on the energy that you need?
Spot on. It sure does. So when you first download it, you enter in all of your personal information, including your height, including your weight, including an estimation of how active you are on a day-to-day basis. And then you also put in your goal. Let's say you want to gain muscle mass, you want to gain 0.5 kilo a week. There's a feature where you put in, I want to gain X amount per week. And then it will give you an estimation of the amount of energy you need to eat. And then you can keep track of whether you are or are not meeting those goals day to day. Okay. In saying that, that's just an estimation that may be accurate for you, that may be very inaccurate for you. And you've got to, over time with your trainer, pay attention to your body weight as well as other goals of yours, and then adjust how much you're eating accordingly to that. So the number it gives you will just be an estimation to start with. Yep. That question was about MyFitnessPal for anyone watching from home. Okay. Anybody else got any questions before we wrap it up for this evening? No? Well, thank you very much for all of you that attended this evening. Hope you found it beneficial. Everybody stay healthy, stay inside for Melburnians, take care of yourselves, and use this time or any spare time you have to pivot and to work even harder on your goals, both food and exercise, as well as any other goals you have related. Okay? I'll end it there. Have a lovely night. Thank you again.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. See ya. Bye.
Bye for now. Thanks to all those who watch from home on Instagram. We're going to end it there. Take care of yourselves and tune in next week, Tuesday at 6:30.